We tell stories at Milwaukee PBS. Here's one you may have missed.
Janice Sierra was the first civilian emergency medical service pilot in the United States, and she's been the only female pilot for Flight for Life. Last month, Janice was inducted into the Wisconsin Aviation Hall of Fame. Though no longer flying, Janice agreed to head back up in the air with the Flight for Life pilot and 1036 videographer Brian Ewig to help us tell her story.
My name is Janice Sierra, and I was a pilot with Flight for Life since 1987. The last time I flew was March 28th of 2016. All right, we're ready. Going back up today, I was really struggling. I miss my people. I do miss being up in the air. I was in high school and starting my senior year, we didn't have money for me to go to college, but I wanted to be a nurse. I went into the guidance counselor's office at school, and one of the first things I saw on the little stand was a brochure that said tuition assistance for nursing. And I'm thinking, oh, my prayers are answered. So I open it up and it says join the Army. So I thought, well, you know, I would do that. Unfortunately, there were no nursing slots open. So I turned 18 in March, and 2 weeks later I started basic training, and then after basic training I came home for a couple weeks and flew back down to Alabama for flight school in the Army. You don't know what you don't know. I just knew that I was 18 and I actually thought I knew everything. When I told my mom, she was like, oh, well, show them what a good woman can do. My brother had been killed in Vietnam as a medevac pilot. I didn't reflect back until 5 or 6 years ago what my parents, especially my mama, must have thought when I came to her 6 years after her son had been killed in a helicopter in medevac, and came back to her and said I was going to be a helicopter pilot in the Army. But back then, you know, you're young, you're invincible, and we know it all. And when I told my dad, he went, you're not going to be able to do that. You know, and I'm like, that was my motivation. I sat front seat in a Cobra, and I thought it was the most fantastic thing I'd ever done in my life. And I ended up going to flight school. Got down there, was scared to death because they started yelling at me as soon as I walked in the door. It was probably the hardest year of my life. I didn't want any special treatment as a woman. I didn't want the men that I went through any training with or anything to change because I was there. I felt I needed to adapt to what they were doing. I just dug in and did what I was asked to do. And by doing that, I gained a lot of respect. My mother had passed away in 1985, and I got really homesick. Got in my car, and I drove down to Freighters. I knocked on the door and said, hi, I'm looking for a flying job. I never really thought I couldn't do something, you know, and the thing that was so fabulous about Flight for Life, for me personally, was I got to be a part of the medical that I always kind of wanted, the nursing. Our first aid kit is in the back doors here. And then I got to do what I really loved, was the flying.
When we would go into the hospital, in the midst of all the chaos that was going on, the controlled chaos in the room, I could look over and Janice was with the family. She had the same compassion and concern for the family as we do for the patient. My name is Rebecca Schwoko, and I'm a flight nurse with Flight for Life. She can be no nonsense when we're when we're flying, and she definitely takes charge. But she also has a lot of compassion, and she has a sense of humor. I miss her. I didn't really know that she was the first female EMS pilot in the United States. It wasn't until much later on that she started talking about her career, and I realized who I was flying with, and felt very honored actually to be able to fly with her. What Janice brought to the table is her warmth and just her openness and her willing to just sit down and listen to you if you're having a bad day. Life isn't always fair, and we see that.
It was a burn patient that was still alive, still able to communicate, but couldn't get out of the vehicle. And it was terrible. Children are very hard, especially when you have your own children. But when you get back and you leave your shift is when you really start to think about it.
Just talking about it and knowing that you can express yourself to the other person. And we hug each other a lot.
My name is Leif Erickson. I'm a flight paramedic with Flight for Life. When I came in, I just assumed that pilots were typically male pilots. I was a little taken back that there was a female pilot within the organization. Janice's skills as a pilot were no different than the other pilots that we worked with, sometimes more exceptional.
She did a lot to break down that gender bias of, the female is supposed to be the nurse, the paramedic's supposed to be the male, and the pilot is also supposed to be the male. She almost poo-pooed it. She acted like it was no big deal.
Briefly, she'd talk about her military background, but there was never a mention of the first. Janice is a very humble, dedicated individual to the aviation and medical industry, but would never brag about herself. There was never a tone or an air about her.
I was shocked when I was called and told I was selected. I had no foreknowledge of this at all. I'm humbled.
I think she's a trailblazer. I really do. I think that the fact that her and women like her have done the things that they've done and kind of conquered those male-dominated fields. I have a daughter that, really the sky's the limit, and it's because of people like Janice. It's women like Janice that have allowed that to happen.
All right, head up, there you go, there you go.
I flew for 41 years. I loved my time in the military. I've had a wonderful career. I have no downside to my career. I think it was just the perfect fit for me.
We got some openings if she wants to come back. She served our country, and she served Flight for Life well.
Watch 1036 on Milwaukee PBS and watch online at milwaukeepbs.org.